Hi everyone, my name is Laura. I love to crochet, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I made this crochet granny square sweater, how I measured for it, what kind of materials I used, how I joined the squares together. It's a perfect project for the fall and winter and creates a really nice colorful look. This pattern was based on Mrs. Moonhaven's granny square sweater. I've made some tweaks and adaptations and made it my own and kind of fits the way that I like it to fit. But if you prefer a written pattern, her version has a written pattern available, so I recommend going to check that out. Again, this one's a little bit different, but I wanted to shout her out because hers is beautiful as well and inspired this one. So I'm going to take you through all of the details, everything you need to know, and we are going to make one together. And then in next week's video, I'm going to show you how to take kind of the fundamentals and the measurements of this sweater and how to turn that into a sweater using smaller granny squares, and then also how to turn this pattern into a cardigan as well. So 3 sweaters for the price of 1, and all you really need to know how to do is make a granny square, and I will walk you through that in this video as well. But I look forward to showing you how to make one, and let's get right into it. So in terms of materials, for the version of the sweater that I am wearing at the start of this video, I used 2 skeins of Loops and Threads Soft Classic in the color Off-White, and I used Karen Baby Cakes in the color Retro, 2 skeins of that as well, and a 6mm crochet hook. And then for the version that I am making in the video today, I used the same base, so 2 skeins of Loops and Threads Soft Classic in Off-White, and then I used Loops and Threads Soft Classic in Butter Yellow, Red, Pink, Navy Blue, and Loops and Threads Impeccable in the color Kelly Green. And when it comes to picking out yarn for your own version, what's really important is to make sure that the yarn you're using is all the same weight. So even if you are bringing different colors in, making sure that they are all the same weight gives the cardigan a uniform look, and make sure that each of your squares is the exact same dimensions. So for these sweaters, all of those yarns were in a weight 4, and that just helps give it a uniform look. So firstly, I thought it would be helpful to talk about how I measured myself and got the dimensions that I needed to create this sweater. I'm pretty much a true medium, so if you are similar in size to me, you can follow my measurements, but if you're not, I wanted to show you how I got the size that I needed so that you can make it yourself as well. So the first measurement that you're going to need to take is across the widest part of your torso. For me, that is around my bust, and go all the way around your body and measure that way. So for me, that measurement came out to 38 inches. And because I didn't want this sweater to be like form-fitting and tight, I added 2 more inches to give it a little bit more room and not have it be kind of skin tight. So that gave me 40 inches. And because we are working this sweater, you work the front and you work the back. So I divided that measurement by 2, and that gave me 20 inches. And now from there, I took that measurement of 20 inches, which again is the width that I needed to create, and I divided that by 3 because we are creating the width with 3 granny squares. So that came to 6.66 inches. I just made mine 6.5 inches because that's easier, and who's gonna notice like 0.67 inch? So I knew I needed to make each square 6.5 inches to fit the width of my body. Then working the length, again, I measured from the top of my armpit down to my waist, and for me that was about 12 inches. So that math worked out really nicely. I needed each of these squares to be 6.5 inches, and then I wanted to do 2 squares for the length, so that would be again 6.5 inches essentially for each square. Because it is a square, your measurements need to be the same for your width and your height of each square. So if you want it to be a little bit more cropped, just make sure that you are still making the sweater wide enough to fit the width of your body. I would say the width measurement is more important than the length measurement. As you can see, when I sewed the squares together, I didn't find the length to be as long as I wanted. So I just added a few more rows of granny stitch to the bottom to give it that length. So I would say use your width measurement for the most part, and just make sure that they are kind of close to what you want your length measurement to be as well. So to create the base of the sweater, we'll be making granny squares. If you already know how to make a granny square, you can skip past this section. Just make sure that you are using a triple crochet to make the gauge, or whatever stitch is required to make the gauge to match your measurements. So if you are following this pattern exactly to the way that I did it, I used a triple crochet instead of a double crochet to create my granny squares. If you are following along, I will show you how to make a granny square as well. So I'm starting with the color that I'm using for the inside of the square, which is this yellow. And I'm going to start with a magic circle. You don't have to start with a magic circle. If you prefer to make a chain of 4 and slip stitch that together and then make your stitches into that circle that you've created with the chain, you can do that as well. But I find a magic ring just makes it a little bit cleaner. I will link a magic ring tutorial down below. I do it wrong, so don't follow what I'm doing here. But there will be a tutorial linked below if you need help with your magic rings. And then I'm going to start with a chain of 4. So that creates our first triple crochet. Once I've made my chain of 4, I am going to wrap the yarn around my crochet hook twice. That gives us the starting point for a triple crochet. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the magic circle, yarn over, and pull through so that there are now 4 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops, and that is your second triple crochet. And I'm going to repeat that one more time, so I'm going to wrap the yarn around my hook twice, insert my hook into the magic circle, yarn over, pull through, so I have 4 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So I've made my first cluster of 3 triple crochets. Now I'm going to make a chain of 1, and I am going to repeat that process again, putting 3 triple crochets into the magic loop. So again, I'm going to wrap the yarn around my hook twice, insert that into the magic loop, yarn over so that there are 4 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'm going to repeat that 2 more times. And then I am going to chain 1. I'm going to repeat that again. And one more time, so that by the end of this row, I have 4 clusters of 3 triple crochets, and that makes the base of our granny square. And when I get back to the end, I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to insert my hook into the top loop of the chain 4 that we started with. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to slip stitch those 2 stitches together. So I'm just going to pull that loop through both of the stitches that are on my hook, like that. And now to fasten off, I like to chain 2 and pull up a loop. Then I just take my scissors and I cut that loop in half, and I kind of shimmy the 2 crochets that I've made down, and it forms a really nice secure knot at the bottom. So that's how I like to tie that off. Then I'm going to add my next color. In this case, it's pink. I'm going to create a slip knot and I'm going to insert my hook into that loop. Now I'm going to take my hook and insert it between those clusters of 3. So where we've made that chain 1 and there's a space, I'm going to insert my hook there. And then I'm going to repeat what we did at the start of the previous row. So I'm going to secure that loop with a slip stitch, and then I'm going to chain 4, acting as my first triple crochet. Then I'm going to do 2 more triple crochets into that same space, exactly like we did in that first round, and I'm going to chain 1. Then in that next space between the clusters, I'm going to repeat that process. So I'm going to add 3 triple crochet into that gap. Now at this point, I need to be creating the corner of my granny square. That's what makes it a square. So I'm going to chain 2. So instead of chaining 1 like we've been doing, we're going to chain 2. Then I'm going to wrap the yarn around my hook twice, again for a triple crochet, and I'm going to insert that triple crochet into the same space that I have been working in. So in that same space where I've just put those 3 triple crochets, I'm going to put 3 more triple crochets, and that forms your corner. Then I'm going to chain 1, and in that next space between the clusters, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to do 3 triple crochets, chain 2, and do another 3 triple crochets. And then I'm going to chain 1 and repeat that again. So making 2 clusters of 3 triple crochets with a chain of 2 in between. Then I'm going to chain 1, and we're back to where we started. So you'll see that this cluster right now is lonely. It's just 1 cluster of 3, not 2 like all of its friends. So we need to add 3 more triple crochets into that space. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. Wrap the yarn around my hook twice, insert, create my 3 triple crochets. Then I'm going to chain 2 and slip stitch into the top loop that we made of that chain of 4 that we started with. And now we have the 4 corners of our granny square. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before and just fasten off. And now onto our third color. In this case, I'm using green. I'm going to create a slip stitch and attach that to my hook. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the corner, so into that space between the 2 clusters where we've made that corner, insert my hook there, and start like we've done with the past rows. So I'm going to chain 4 and create 2 triple crochets. Then I'm going to chain 1, and we are going into the side of the granny square. So this space in between these 2 corners is the side. So I'm going to chain 1 and put 3 triple crochets into this space. This is not a corner, so it doesn't need those 2 sets of clusters, just 1 set of 3 triple crochets into that space. Then I'm going to chain 1, and in the next space, I'm going to put a cluster of 3 triple crochets. I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to put another cluster of 3 triple crochets back into that same space. So you're essentially building a corner on top of a corner. So if you see that you're in a corner, you know that you need to be putting 2 clusters of 3 triple crochets with a chain of 2 crochets in between to keep that corner going. You'll definitely know if you did it wrong, because your granny square will no longer become a square. So you're going to repeat that process again. So doing a cluster of 3, chaining 1, and then doing a cluster of 3 triple crochets, chaining 2, and 3 triple crochets into the same space, forming a corner. And you're going to repeat until you get back to that first lonely cluster of 3 triple crochets. And you're going to do the same thing that you did on the previous round. So chaining 1, making a triple crochet into that space, another triple crochet, and a third triple crochet, chaining 2, and joining at the top of that chain 4 with a slip stitch. So it's not lonely anymore. And now it's time to add our final color, which is the off-white color. And so we're going to start that the exact same way. Start with a slip stitch into the space between the cluster of 3 triple crochets, and create your first cluster of 3 triple crochets. Chain 1. Then you're going to add a single cluster of 3 triple crochets because we're working on the side and not the corner. And you're going to do that twice. So 2 lonely triple crochet clusters to create the sides, so you'll see that here. And then you've reached another corner, so that's when you'll do your triple crochet cluster of 3, chain 2, triple crochet cluster of 3. So you can see that here. You're going to repeat that again around all of the sides until you get back to where you started. find your lonely cluster that needs its friend and add your triple crochet cluster of 3 in that same space, chain 2, and slip stitch at the top of that beginning chain 4 to join. So it's really just doing the same steps over and over and building the square out as you go. And when you get to the end of this row, you are going to fasten off, and that is your first granny square. And for 8 of the granny squares that you create, you are going to add an extra row of white all around the outside, or whatever color you're using for the border. These granny squares are for the sleeves, and they need to be a little bit longer and a little bit wider, so that's why we add that extra row around the outside. So you'll see that here. I just followed the exact same steps as before, but now we have 3 of those side clusters instead of 2 like we did in the previous round, and we are chaining 2 in between and creating those corners. So the exact same thing that we've been doing before, just adding another row around the outside, and again that's for 8 of the squares that are making up our sleeves. Okay, you're going to repeat those steps until you have 8 of the larger squares and 16 of the smaller squares. So that is 22 squares in total. And the next step for your squares, once you've finished all 22 of them, is to block them. I know this is annoying. I know it's an extra step and you just want to get the sweater done, but it really makes a huge difference. I just wanted to show you. So this is what a square looks like after I've blocked it, and this is what a square looks like before. So you can see it's really tight, and you don't have the nice definition around the corners like you do with this square. And this is really what makes it look good when it's on the body. It gives it the drape that it needs, and it makes it fit in a way that feels like there's more ease and it's less tight and condensed and compressed like this one. So I know we don't want to do it. It's an extra step, but I really recommend blocking your squares, and I'm going to show you quickly how I block them. So with this square here, I'm going to lay it on my blocking board, and I'm going to use a steamer, and I'm going to steam my square. So I'm holding my steamer about 1 inch away from my granny square, and I'm just going to give it a quick once over, just getting it warm so that we can pin the corners. Then I'm going to take some straight pins like this, and I'm going to put 1 pin in each corner. I like to use the guides that are on my blocking boards, but if you're using like a yoga mat, or I've seen people use cardboard boxes, just try and make sure that you are consistent with how you are blocking your squares and the size that you are pinning them to. So I've added 1 straight pin into each corner. If you have some wonkiness on the sides, you can add pins on the sides as well, but I find just 1 pin in each corner usually does the job. And then I'm going to take my steamer again, and the same thing, just holding it about 1 inch above the project, I'm going to steam. This steam, I like to go a little bit slower and make sure that I'm getting the edges and the corners really nicely steamed. And you can see the fibers relaxing as you run the steamer over, which I find very satisfying. Do 1 last pass on each of the corners and through the center. And now that's what the square looks like. So a lot more ease to the fabric, and a lot nicer of a shape. So I will leave this on the blocking boards. I like to leave them overnight. If you can't do that, I think a minimum of 4 hours so that it can get warm and totally cool and kind of set in this shape. is ideal. I know not everyone has the tools to block their squares, but if you're putting all this time and effort into making the garment, I really do recommend blocking. I think it's what takes projects from looking handmade to looking a little bit more clean, and it makes it just so much easier to wear as well. So I highly recommend you block your squares before you assemble your project. Okay, so I wanted to show you how I arrange the squares. So as you can see, I have kind of two rectangles of 6 squares. So that is the front and the back. And then there are 2 squares here. Those are the shoulders. And then I have the 8 sleeve pieces forming the sleeves. And for the sleeve pieces, I just line them up so that the center of the 2 squares meets the center of the shoulder there. So you'll see that. But that's how it looks when they're all laid out. And now it's time to seam the sweater together. So what I like to do is slip stitch my squares together. If you know how to do a join as you go, you can do that for the body pieces as well. But I prefer to do a slip stitch, especially because it adds a little bit more stretch than just stitching them together with a tapestry needle. And it's nice to have that stretch on the seams. So I'm just going to highlight with a line here so that you can see where I seam them all up. But I basically just go along the edge and kind of do those 6 together. Then I'll go downwards, do the same for the other panel. Then I'll add the shoulders, and then I'll add the sleeves. But I'll show you how I slip stitch them together and then how I join the panels together as well. Okay, so to slip stitch the panels together, I am taking the same color of yarn that I've been using to do the outer border, and I'm going to tie a slip knot and insert my hook. And then I'm going to take the panels and I'm going to flip the top one onto the bottom one like this. So now their right sides are sandwiched together and the wrong sides are on the outside. Then I take my hook and I'm going to insert it into the chain that I used to make the corner. So into the second stitch of the chain that I used to make the corner, if you can see that here. And then I'm also going to slip stitch through the same chain on the other square. So that second chain of the corner, and I'm going to slip stitch my hook in there as well. Then I'm going to join them together with a slip stitch. So I'm going to bring my yarn around, wrap it around my hook. I'm going to pull through both of those stitches, and I've slip stitched them together, and I just tighten that slip knot and move it to the back. So now I'm going to continue slip stitching into each of the stitches that I've created along this join here. So I'm going to go into, this will focus, into this top stitch here and the same stitch on the other side. So that top stitch of the first cluster of 3 stitches that we've created. And then I'm going to yarn over, pull through those 2 and pull through this one, and that has slip stitched them together. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go through the second top loop of that triple crochet, go through the loop of the one behind it as well, yarn over and slip stitch through both like that. And next one. And it's good to just check and make sure that you're going into the correct stitch. You're going into the same stitch for the front and the back, so you'd be going through the top stitch of the second post, top stitch of the third post, this single crochet that you make in between. So just make sure that your stitches are lining up and continue to slip stitch them together. And I'm going to go until I reach the end. Okay, so now I'm at the first stitch of the 2 single crochets that I made the corner. I'm going to go into that first stitch and same go into the first stitch of that chain of 2 at the back, slip stitch, slip stitch. So that is that first row joined together like that. And now you're going to keep going. So there will be 2 more if you're working on the body panel, 2 more kind of sets of 2, and you're going to do the same thing and slip stitch them all together. So I'll show you how I join them. So these are the next 2 squares for my front panel, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold them over so that the front sides, the right sides, sorry, are sandwiched together. And then I'm going to take my yarn and my hook that's already connected, and I'm going to go into, just like we did in the last one, that second stitch in the chain of 2 that forms the corner, and the same on the back side. Now just make sure that your squares are nice and kind of butted up against each other. You don't have too much space between the 2 squares that you're trying to join, or it just won't look as clean. And then you're just going to do the exact same thing that you've been doing. So you're going to yarn over and pull through and pull through. And now you've joined the squares together. And then I'm just going to continue on doing what I was doing on the previous set of 2, which is going into each of the stitches and slip stitching them all together. So now I've sewn all 6 of the granny squares for my front panel together horizontally, and now I need to go in and seam them together vertically. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to fold them over so that the right sides are touching and the wrong sides are facing out, and then I'm going to slip stitch along the join there and do the same thing here and slip stitch all the way along here as well, so that we have a panel that is all connected. Okay, so as you can see, I have seamed up all of the squares and joined all of my panels together, and this is what it looks like. And now to form the sweater, you just take this shape and you fold it in half, like this. So now you have your front panel, your 2 sleeves, and your back panel, and now it's time to join these together. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to seam your project together. So I flipped my work inside out. So this is the sleeve, the body, and the other sleeve here. And I'm just going to join it exactly the same way that I joined the squares together initially. So I'm going to take my yarn that's the same color as the base of the sweater, and I'm going to create a slip knot with the same hook that I've been using. I'm going to attach it, and then I'm going to start at the edge of my sleeve, so where your arm would come out. And I'm just going to do exactly what we did to put the squares together. So I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain of the corner, and I'm going to slip stitch together. And then I'm going to continue doing the exact same thing, slip stitching all of the stitches together. And I will continue along the bottom of the sleeve to the armpit and keep going down the side of the body. So from there to there, and then fasten off. This part is where your body comes out of, so don't seam that together or you're not going to be able to put it on. And then just do the same thing on the other side as well. So seaming up the body and down to the edge of the sleeve. Okay, so now I've seamed up the underarms and the sides of the sweater, and this next step is optional, but this is a tip if you want to add a little bit more length to the bottom of your sweater. I have quite a long torso, so I like to do this. On the version that I'm wearing, I've added 2 rows of granny stitch to the bottom just to add about 4 extra inches in the length. So I'm going to show you how to do that if you'd like to do that as well. So I'm going to take the same yarn that I've been using in that base color, and I'm going to create a slip knot and insert my hook. And then I'm going to join my yarn to my project. I like to start somewhere that's a little bit more inconspicuous, so I usually start somewhere along the sides and the underarm. If you start right in the middle, sometimes it's just you don't want that join to be like right front and center of your project, so I'm going to be adding it in the back here. So I just insert my hook in the space between the 2 stitches, and then I create a slip stitch there, and I chain 4 like that. And then I'm going to do 2 triple crochets into the same space. So just like we've been doing all the way around, you're just going to be creating these clusters of 3. You are not going to be creating corner clusters like you were for the granny squares. It's just going to be these single clusters of 3 working all the way around the project. And I did 2 rows of clusters around the bottom. So I'm just going to keep going and I'll show you what that looks like. And then you'll see here, technically I've reached a corner, but I'm not going to do a second cluster. I'm just going to go into the next space. Okay, we're almost done. Just time to add some finishing touches. So you'll see on the version that I'm wearing here, I added a row of double crochets to the border around the sleeves and also around the bottom of the sweater just to finish it off. So I'm going to do that now. Again, really simple, just going to create a slip knot with the yarn that's the same color as the base of the sweater, insert my hook, and then I'm going to do a double crochet. So I'm working on the right side of my project, and I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm going to do my double crochets into the top loop of all of the stitches. So insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over and pull through. Now, because we're just doing double crochets, I'm going to chain 3 instead of chaining 4, and I'm just going to wrap the yarn around the hook 1 time instead of twice like you do for a triple crochet. And then I'm going into the top loop of the next stitch there and creating my double crochet. And I'm going to continue that all the way around into each of the top loops. And again, I'm doing that on the edge of the sleeves, all around the bottom, and I'm also going to do that all around our neckline here as well to give it a more kind of polished and finished look. So again, yarn over, and we're going into the top stitch of each, and it just gives it a nicely finished edge. So I will see you when that's done. Okay, and we've made it. We're on to the final step. So as you can see, I've added a single crochet border around each of the sleeves and around the bottom of the sweater. And now I'm just going to show you how I did that on the neckline. So I picked a color from the granny squares. I tried a couple different ones. Usually I'll just put a couple kind of stitches on each sleeve and hold them up to the sweater and see which color I'm liking best. So I was debating between the dark blue or the red, but I really like the pop of cherry red, especially for the fall. So that's what I'm going to do. And again, I'm working on the right side of the sweater. I'm going to take that cherry red color and create a slip knot. get my hook, same hook that I've been using for the entire project, and I'm going to connect the red color with a slip stitch. And because this is a single crochet, I'm just going to chain 1 to start, and I'm going to do the exact same thing that we did for the double crochet border. Just insert my hook and do a single crochet all the way along in each stitch. This was something that Jada, Mrs. Moonheaven, did in her version of the pattern, and I thought it was absolutely gorgeous, and it really ties all the colors of the sweater together. In the original one, I did yellow, and I think that was really cute as well. But I love the way that the red pops against the cream of the sweater and brings out the warmer tones in the granny squares as well. So I'm going to continue this all the way around, and then our sweater is finished. And with that, we are finished. This is the finished result of my sweater. I love the way that this came out. When I was putting the colors together, it was a little bit of a trust the process kind of moment. I just wasn't sure if they were all going to go together, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I think it's perfect for the fall time. And I really like the way that these nice vibrant colors look. So I hope you had fun following along. And this is a pattern that can be taken in so many different ways and explored in so many different colors. For example, this one really bright and bold as opposed to the original, which is a little bit more muted. And in the original, you can see as well, I did the center of each square in white as opposed to this one where the centers are all different colors. So it really kind of changes the look and gives you a different kind of effect. I also made a version of this sweater for Valentine's Day last year. And for this one, I made all of the squares exactly the same. So didn't mix up the colors at all like I'd done on the other two. This one, every single square was the same. So you can see there's lots of different ways that you can play around with it. You can mix up the colors, you can do the same colors, you can play around with adding white, you could do this on all kinds of different base colors as well. Like this one's on a pink base. I think it'd look really nice if you did bold colors on a black base as well. So there's lots of ways to make this sweater your own, play around and really play with color. I wanted to give a couple tips on color palette as well, because I know that can be tricky. So if you're making this and you are really lost on color palette, you have a hard time pairing colors together, not really sure what to do, I would recommend doing something like I did for this sweater, which is just buying a skein of yarn that has multiple colors in it, because you know that those colors are all going to go together. They already did the work of pairing the colors together, so now you just need to make them into a sweater. When I used the Karen baby cake for this one, I just rolled up each color from the cake into individual balls and used it that way. So that's an option if you're really kind of like, I don't know what colors, I don't know what goes well together, have someone do it for you. So that is really nice. For this sweater, I actually put all of these colors into a color palette generator, so I can link that down below. I like to do that just to see that all the colors look nice next to each other, that they kind of make sense before getting into the process of making the squares. You'll also notice with this sweater and with the other one, I tried to pick colors that are in the same vibrancy. So for this one, it's all kind of primary brights, as opposed to this one is more muted pastels. And that's gonna help guarantee that they go together nicely as well. So just take a look at your palette. If one color seems more muted than the others, it might be good to reassess and maybe just see, oh, that blue looks a little muted, maybe I can swap it in for a brighter blue, or vice versa, to make sure that it is looking cohesive. So I'd recommend those two tips for color. And the last thing is just trusting the process. Again, when I was putting these squares together, I was not sure how they were gonna all go together. Then when I laid the sweater out, I was like, I love it. So sometimes you just have to keep going, press on, and see how it all comes together. But I wanted to give you those couple color tips as well. But yes, thank you so much for watching. Next week's video, like I said, I will be showing you how to make the same sweater with 4 squares across instead of 3, and 3 rows down. So a smaller square. Those squares are also going to be made out of wool, so a different fabric too. And then also how to take this sweater and turn it into a cardigan. And I really have been loving the cardigan version of this. Those kind of chunky granny square cardigans I've been seeing everywhere on Instagram. And it's really easy to turn this into a cardigan. So, but thank you again for watching. I know this was a long one. I really appreciate your support, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.